Dr. Rock, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Elba?
Here.
Mrs. Moomin?
Here.
Ms. Mitchell?
Here.
Mr. Freeman?
Here. At this time, would everybody stand and face the flag and say the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You may be seated.
No, you don't.
Next on our board agenda is the approval of the Agenda 1.3. Board members, you had a chance to review this agenda for tonight?
Yes, sir.
Is there any questions or any corrections or additions to this agenda tonight, board members?
Board President, I would like to, 6.1, authorizing the superintendent to authorize RFQs and seek recommend the owner's representative. I would like to take that out.
That's under Strategic Plan 6.1 Facilities.
Yes.
Okay. Treasurer Dr. Rock, we're taking out 6.1 Facilities.
Yes.
Okay.
Also, but also would like to, if possible, discuss the facilities master plan. We do have our timeline for the new buildings. Would that be part of you guys' presentation? Okay,
We'll cover it
we'll strike it.
on a larger basis, but yeah, we'll get some of the data.
Okay, that's fine.
Just want to strike it all together?
Yeah, just strike it.
Okay.
Okay.
Dr. Rock, have you reviewed this agenda and made sure that this district is financially secure for all these items on this agenda tonight?
Yes, sir.
Okay. At this time, I would need a motion to approve the agenda.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to move that this board approve the agenda for the work session meeting dated August 10th, 2017, with the removal of item 6.1 facilities under the strategic plan section.
Do I have a second?
I second.
Moved by Vice President Mitchell, second by Board Member Mumin. Any discussion about the agenda, board members?
No, sir.
Dr. Rock, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Gator?
I abstain because I missed that, so I apologize.
Mrs. Moomin?
Yes.
Mrs. Elba?
Yes.
Ms. Mitchell?
Yes.
Mr. Freeman?
Yes, motion carries 4-0, one abstain. Next on our board agenda is 1.5. We have a presentation by Bob Ivory. He's with the Students of Promise. Bob has a few of our scholars, and I just wanted him to come and highlight the great program that exists and how it helps our scholars. I have had a chance to participate in the last almost 2 years since I've been on the board, and it's a great program. Bob Ivory, the floor is yours.
Thank you, thank you. To the chair, to the distinguished board members, and the Warrensville Heights community, it's always a privilege and a pleasure and an honor to stand before you. I've always say this is like my second home because I spent so much of my childhood. I envy my siblings that went to Warrensville School, but this is kind of second home for me, and I'll bring that up a little later and to kind of put an exclamation point on that. I believe he said that there's a clicker or somehow I can.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes, sir.
In the time that I have, I believe what my charge is to not only kind of give an update on what's going on here in Warrensville Heights, but obviously to present to some, introduce to others the entire model of our initiative that what we're doing. And I can't do that without beginning with the origin. And if you look at just the first graphic, which is the first image on the PowerPoint, and I keep that graphic there for a reason. This is our original marketing piece when I was in the governor's office, and everything in that collage of images reflect what the original Closing the Achievement Gap model was. You have a statewide linkage coordinator meeting in the top left. You have students that were from all over the state of Ohio, and you have in the center the graphic that I love, which is what personified the Closing Achievement Gap initiative, was to increase the graduation rate. So I had the privilege to work under my mentor and leader of the model. I'm already messing up. There we go. Former State Senator C.J. Prentice, who is now retired. I was already in the governor's office for regional office as a community outreach coordinator, and she recruited me to come to Columbus to join her team in Closing the Achievement Gap, which was a $20 million initiative, only governor in the state, in the country, that allocated earmarked dollars specific to closing the achievement gap in the state, targeting African American and Latino males. I won't get into some of the data. You're well versed on that we have an achievement gap and how students of color underperform in reference to their counterparts, which therefore produces an achievement gap. But I also would be remiss if I didn't add to that. There's also an opportunity gap, and then there is an exposure gap. And all those pieces go together when we talk about the achievement gap, and that is something else that we address in this initiative. This, again, is just some state-to-state data. I might have to have one of my students even do the clicker. What am I doing wrong? Is it?
I'll do it for you.
Okay, thanks. I have this PowerPoint memorized. I've probably done it, I don't know how many hundreds of times, but each time it feels like the first time, because what it does is remind me of the work that we do and the thousands of students that have been touched by this model. If you can, Superintendent Jolly, go to the next model, because this is really the crux of the initiative. Students of Promise / Closing the Achievement Gap is basically a school / community-based initiative where we're targeting students that we have determined based on certain risk factors to be at risk for not graduating high school or dropping out or not graduating with their class on time. So what we've done with this model from its inception is embed in every school, and we're in Garfield Heights, Maple Heights, Warrensville Heights, Cleveland Heights, and we also piloted this summer for the first time in East Cleveland, which we're hoping to bring aboard if funding permits. But we embed in each school what's called a linkage coordinator. The linkage coordinator is actually the tie that binds. The linkage coordinator is the rudder, the sail, and pretty much the anchor to this model. Because what this person does, and they are pretty much that role model, advocate, support system, liaison between the teacher, the student, the household, building leaders. They're that person, and you have that person in Ms. Netta. She couldn't be here. I talked to her earlier, and I believe Ms. Snicky might still be out of town. But I brought the next best thing, which is, we call him Mr. Students of Promise. So he answered the call when I called him this morning. I'm going to hopefully yield some of my time so he can actually talk about his experience, and we can ask some questions as well. But if you look at this model, in around it, you see the student in the center, which really drives the entire initiative. But right above the student is that linkage coordinator. And when you see all the different supportive services around it, we can't, and I can't, take credit for all the other components that make of closing the achievement gap, because teachers are here, building leaders are here, community leaders are here, credit recovery was already here, field trips was already here, all these things that are part of this model. But what I think we do, and what this initiative is aimed to do, is to collaborate and field trips was already here. All these things that are part of this model, but what I think we do, and what this initiative is aimed to do, is to collaborate and field trips was already here. All these things that are part of this model, but what I think we do, and what this initiative is aimed to do, is to collaborate and field trips was already here. All these things that are part of this model, but what I think we do, and what this initiative is aimed to do, is to collaborate and field trips was already here. All these things that are part of this factors, or one of the components that students that had dropped out, one thing that they say in the data says that they did not have a significant adult in their lives. That is synonymous as far as the data, that there was not one significant adult that really led to them not completing school. So that is where that whole linkage coordinator concept comes from. Now let me rewind the clock back to 2001 when I initially started to talk about there was a Black State Legislative Caucus convention where Senator C.J. Prentice was the president of the Education Committee, and they convened a study in 2001, and these best practices came from that 2001 study, and it all pointed to having that person, which we call a linkage coordinator, in the lives of that students full-time. And when I say full-time, it doesn't stop at 3 o'clock. Ms. Nettis will tell you that she will get a call at 2 in the morning. I get calls at 2 in the morning still for students that are no longer even in school. So that's just the connection between that role and that linkage coordinator, and how they pretty much are the wheel that pretty much makes the program go. Mr. Jolly? As I alluded to, the best practices, these are all from the original model. Many of them that we still employ today. As you see at the top is the linkage coordinator. You'll see second is single gender classrooms. Now, when we were in Cleveland, I believe John Adams had single gender classrooms, and that was like a pilot. It was the only school, I think at that time, under Dr. Sanders that allowed single, and that took a lot of planning, a lot of rescheduling, but our data showed how those students performed actually better by having all-male classrooms, and that's a little different to pull off. That takes a lot of scheduling, that takes unions to agree, but that is a best practice that data shows that the students, especially in the 9th grade, performed better when they were in a single-gender classroom. And like I said, the other components, credit recovery, book clubs, the academic promotion team, which pretty much Ms. Nettis has a team of core teachers that she works with that she can go to and deal with on a daily basis or a weekly meeting and so forth, and to work with a cohort of teachers, almost like a little interdisciplinary team that she can call upon when she has, issues or things to address with the students. Student-led support groups, uniforms, that comes from just the notion that we believe that students should be well-rounded, well-dressed, well-read, well-spoken, and out there any Morehouse people, and they know where I kind of stole that from, because that's the model of the Morehouse people. Unfortunately, I did not go to Morehouse, but thought it was very important that we have a uniform way that we can, approach ourselves. And it's not new, because if you go to university, if you go to St. Ignatius, you go to St. Ed's, and a lot of affluent schools, you will see blazers, uniforms. So we do on occasion, take students out and have them uniformly dressed, and that just gives them some esteem. But never do we not go somewhere when someone says, "Who are those students over there?" I remember we went to Morehouse the first year, and we got off the bus, all of our students uniform. We had Cicely Tyson that came up to us and like, "Who are those?" Cicely Tyson, to ask, "Who are these young men?" Spike Lee, "Who are those young men?" Not just because we were uniform, but how they carried themselves. So we feel very strongly about how we present ourselves. And I can say this proves positive. I've not had one linkage coordinator, probably in the 10 years I've been involved, that has reported back to me of a fight when a student was in a uniform. Now, you can do the data analysis and hire someone to kind of do the analytics on that, but I don't think it takes much to deduce that what the uniform does for our students. Next slide, Mr. Jolly. This pretty much is just a structure of the program, which is based on, like I said, the program management. I'm very proud of the relationships that the linkage coordinator established and the support they receive from the building leader. I know there's been some transition here, but I can say proof positive that there was a great rapport, great relationship, and I'm sure that's going to continue, because I believe the new principal also was from that CTAC model at John F. Kennedy High School. So that relationship between the linkage coordinator and the building leader is paramount, as supported by, obviously, you all as the board and as the superintendent. Parent engagement, that's another piece that's very critical. 2 years ago, we actually had our first parent workshop, and it was here in Warrensville. Very successful event. We had, I think it was a blistery rainy day, but we did have a lot of parents come, and that's another piece that we try to do, and that's one line item in this year's budget that I was in conversation with the county council, that I want to increase that line item when it comes to parent engagement, because that's a piece that I think we can do a little better job with, and need more resources to help support that. But parent engagement is very critical. Let's see what the next slide says. I know after this slide is going to come our evaluation piece, but before that, I just want to you just take a look at the images there, because I have a slide, or I have a PowerPoint for every school district. This is Warrensville up there. So those are your students. Those are activities that we have participated in. I think on the left is when we went to Washington, D.C. That's CNN in Atlanta. That's also Washington, D.C. That's Senator Sherrod Brown. Just that exposure piece that we want to make sure that, and I remember this when I was in school, when I was in Upper Bound. Who did I see? Who came around? Who came to the class? Where did we go visit? So to say to a young man like DeAndre that he's met senators, he's met governors, he's met, those outside of what we call his 6-block radius of awareness, And all those things add to helping us increase the graduation rate, reducing dropout, and in essence, closing the achievement gap. Now, the next few slides are pretty much the county secured an evaluator. So this is so you don't have to take my word on how we're doing. So Case was successful in receiving the, winning the RFP. So they're currently doing an evaluation on the program. This is our 3rd year of closing the achievement gap and students of promise in the county. So what they're gonna do is look at the data, and I'm sure, and as a matter of fact, I got an email today that I believe your EMIS person just emailed whatever the final pieces, because I saw Warrensville was in and done and ready to go. So your data is in that we're collecting. And what we're doing is we're taking the current data of our students, grades, attendance, discipline, and taking those things and comparing it to the students that maybe 2 years prior to the program were not here. So that's the only way we can kind of have a gauge. But I have to preface that with, by no means are we suggesting it is because of students of promise that your scholars are excelling. We believe, and our philosophy is really simple, that we're not here to do a program to you. We're here to do a program with you. And that we don't supplant the great work that you're already doing. We help to support that. So what we're hoping to say is and show that our data, that we're supporting the great work that's going on here in Warrensville by having a linkage coordinator, by having the best practices, by having an exposure field trip, by supporting it for credit recovery. So hopefully we're in support of your mission and helping students that may be a little more challenged graduate on time. Like I say, the criteria. There were only 4 basic criteria when it was the governing initiative. I took the liberty of adding 4 more. And we've always had students that we identified that had missed 25 more days of school. These are our targeted, quote unquote, students of promise. Excessive tardiness to class, missed 5 or more days due to in-school or out-of-school suspension, failed, 2 or more core subjects, performed below proficiency on the last standardized test. And that's something that I think that a lot of people ignore and don't really kind of grasp, and educators would, I hope you would agree, that you can have straight A's and still not be proficient. Because I was one of those students that graduated number 7 in my class and had a 3.7, and the first day of college they were reviewing things I had never heard of, which means there were areas that I obviously were not proficient. So we felt that that might make you at risk of not, graduating on time. Juvenile court supervision and those that have been adjudicated. If you've been adjudicated, then that just by definition means you have been removed from the traditional school setting. And not to say that DYS doesn't have school, but you are definitely going to be a little farther behind if you have been adjudicated. So we felt like that is another risk factor. Obviously, being over the age of your grade level. We've had 18 and 17-year-olds in the 9th grade that you're over your grade level, which also puts you at risk. So by the time you get to be 18 and you're still in the 9th grade, you're probably more thinking about, okay, I'm kind of done with school. But we've had some of those students walk the stage last year that they started with us in the 8th grade and were over that age, but they have high school diplomas now. So with that said, and I think I have to acknowledge our honorable county councilwoman who, as I stated earlier, it is the vision of Cuyahoga County that has made this possible. No other county that I know of in the country has taken specific levy dollars, specific to lead the target, closing the achievement gap in a school-based model. So hopefully she'll have an opportunity as well, as I want to yield my time both to the councilwoman and to Mr. Students of Promise here. And of course, field any questions that you may have.
Okay. You can bring up your student.
Okay.
Come on. I told you I was on that.
How y'all doing? DeAndre Thomas Jr. here at Warrensville. And about Students of Promise, I feel like it's a very good program. Students of Promise, it exposes you to a lot of different things. I think when I went to Washington, D.C. my freshman year with Students of Promise, it was my 2nd time being out of the state of Ohio.
Wow.
Students of Promise, it really helped me a lot. When my cousin passed away this school year, Miss Netta, she was there to comfort me during the school day, so it not only helped me academically, it also helped me emotionally. socially. It exposed me to a lot of different cultures. It bonds me with the different schools, Cleveland Heights, Maple, and Garfield. The students promise helps a lot. Academically, anytime I need help with classwork and a teacher not always only be able to focus on one student because there's multiple students in the room, I ask permission to go to Miss Netta's room. She'll easily be able to help me with something because there's less students in there. It's just like anything I need, Miss Netta's is there for me to help me with it. And it's just a very good program because it can help you with a lot of things. It exposes you to a lot of things. It covers all things, academic, emotional, social, everything. The summer program. Oh, and also, I forgot to mention the summer bridge program. We did a rope course, which will help you physically. During the school year, we do Big Brothers Big Sister program. It gives you mentoring experience, give you a chance to be mentor and be the mentor at the same time. We go over during the school year. We went over to John Dewey. We read to them, so it gives you a lot of opportunities to be mentor and also being mentored too at the same time. I feel that is very positive, and we need that.
Good job, DeAndre.
Thank you.
Great
Thank you.
job.
Proud of you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Can I ask him something?
Go right ahead.
So, what grade are you in right now?
11th.
11th
Junior.
grade? So, what do you want to do when you get out of high school?
When I got out of high school, yes. When I got out of high school, I want to go to Ohio University for sports administration, and I feel like Students of Promise, it helps with that a lot because when we went to Morehouse College this past school year, the man that gave us the tour of the college, he let me know that Morehouse do got a sports administration program, and he said it's real good. So I feel like he gave me the number to one of his peers that was in the sports administration program. So it helps you out with what you want to be with the exposure. So exposure to that.
Well, we wish you well.
Thank you.
I've seen you grow over the last couple of years, got to know you a little bit, and I'm really proud of the young man that you've become, and I'm excited to see what's going to happen once you graduate. So
Thank
good
you.
luck to you, okay?
Thank you.
Oh, and also I want to come back to Warrensville and maybe be the Lakers coordinator.
There you go.
Good job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like Councilwoman Cuyahoga County, Ward 9, Chantel Brown, to come up and say a couple things about the program and how your colleagues help programs like this for schools.
Thank you all. I think when you have a young man like this come before you and speak, it represents what the program is all about. He is all encompassing of the goals that the program sets out to achieve, and so that makes it tangible and real, and it puts faces to dollars that we invest into the community. And so that's the most important thing, is reaching back and being able to help those who need it the most so that they can become leakage coordinators and continue to carry the torch forward. So I really didn't have any prepared remarks, but I do support the program. It has been an outstanding program. Pernell Jones, Councilman Jones, has been Mr. Ivory's primary partner, and because Warrensville is in my district, I've been very engaged, and he keeps me well informed of all of the activities that are going on. And so I am a supporter, and I would like to see this continue in our school system. So.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Board, do you have any questions for Mr. Ivory or his great program that helps our scholars?
I have one.
Yes, ma'am.
And
Yes, ma'am.
actually, you mentioned the 8th graders. Are you in the middle school at all?
Yes, we are. Council probably hates to see me coming because when I come, I'm asking for money. And this is a statement that Senator Prentice said when she went to the governor for the same initiative. She actually asked for $100 million, and she gave her 20 because her really wanted those resources so she could actually start it in the 4th grade.
Okay.
If we really wanted to really lock this thing up, we would actually start it in the 4th grade. And there are some districts across the state that have employed students closing achievement gaps beginning the 4th grade. But we were successful, thanks to Cuyahoga County Council and their advocacy. We hired a middle school linkage coordinator that floats. And she's actually homegrown Warrensville, Miss Nicole Ziegler. And she has been at the middle school 2 days a week. And then she goes to the other schools a day. And that's pretty much just to have a presence, It's very limited of what we can we can't do the same with DeAndre just 1 or 2 days a week. But we can have someone that they can, meaning the middle school student, can identify with someone that they can actually go to. We use some of the same paperwork as far as tracking their grades, their progress. Now she has access to the teachers. She's starting to get relationships with their parents. So when they come to the high school, they're already they're on that runway, so to speak. The goal is definitely if we could have the resources to have linkage coordinators full-time in the middle schools as well. But we're grateful that the county saw fit that we were able to have what we call a floating linkage coordinator that at least has some presence in the school. And matter of fact, we had this past, was it last week? Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated had a youth leadership conference in Cincinnati, and you had 2 students, Mr. Student of Promise here, and Marcellus from the middle school. That were 2 students that we were able to take down to the convention, to the conference. So he's already being exposed, and he's still in the 8th grade.
Board, do you have any other questions?
Thank you. Mr. Ivy, thank you so much for bringing this information to us tonight. You talked about parental engagement,
Yes.
and anyone in education knows that it's a struggle nowadays. How are you keeping your parents engaged, and is it for across the board for the good and the challenging, or is it more prevalent in one of the other areas?
It's across the board. Ms. Ness would tell you that, and what we do is, I kind of instruct them to do a weekly call, but Ms. Ness would tell you that those calls are constant. At least once a week, they touch base with the parents, not just when something is wrong. Sometimes you have to call them, let them know when something's good.
Right.
And I can remember, hearing stories where a parent will say, I've never received a phone call when my kid is doing great, and actually someone called me this evening to tell me about it. So that's something that we institute and have an opportunity to engage the parents, but also to have some formal engagement that we can also share parents' information, that we can have, like we have the workshop here. We encourage parents to be chaperones on some of our field trips. It's an open door policy when they come into the school as far as with our groups. So parent engagement is very critical. And like I said in the onset, that's an area that we hope to bolster. And to, when I was at John F. Kennedy, sometimes I had some haters, like, how is it that it is open house and you have a room full of parents and students of promise offsetting the building? Well, that's because how we engage the parents. And they looked at us as a family and not just another program that they're going to visit and get some literature. So that parent piece is very critical.
Thank you.
Sure.
I want to thank you, Bob. I know I have had a chance to participate in the program with you. I've seen, and I counted last year at your awards, 28 of our scholars with over a 3.0 grade point average, and that was impressive to me.
Yes.
And when you did the actual dinner with the parents, I would say 99% of the parents were there.
Yes, sir.
So keep up what you're doing, and thank you so
All
much.
right, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Next on our board agenda, 1.5, our presentation. We have 2 presenters. We have our Municipal Fund Advisor, Michael Purcella, at Cecina and Associates, and we have our Warrensville Bond Counsel, Austin McGuinn from Squire Patton and Boggs. You can come on up, gentlemen.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Board President, Mr. Jolly's outside, members of the board, thank you for the opportunity to talk tonight. I am Michael Purcella. To my right, Austin McGuinn from Squire Patton Boggs is just introduced by Board President Freeman. We have a little presentation that's up on the screen, and there are some hard copies as well. Oh, yeah, that'd be great. What we're going to talk about today is the upcoming bond issue that the district is looking to undertake as the first part of their co-funded project in association with the Ohio Facilities Construction Commission. So we have a few legal descriptions of what's going on, as well as some of the financial description of what's happening for the upcoming bond issue. I'm going to hand it over to my esteemed colleague here, Mr. McGuinn, who's going to talk a little bit about the legal side of things and how we're going to initiate this upcoming bond issue.
Good to be with everyone tonight. So basically the facilities project is going to be broken down into two segments. The first segment is going to be financed with what's called a certificates of participation financing, shorthand as COPS. And then the second segment, which is going to be, according to the state, conditionally approved by the OFCC in July of 2018 and possibly on the ballot in November of 2018, will be the more traditional voted bond issue. The COPS issue, even though it's a very common financing mechanism in the state, it's a little different than the bond issue that most folks are familiar with, so we thought we'd go through some of the kind of high-level legal basics of how that is structured. So the authority for the COPS issue comes to us from statute, but a lot of the authority is actually granted by the Ohio Supreme Court in a case called Kitchen versus Chrisman that was handed down by the Ohio Supreme Court in the 1970s. And basically, this was a municipality that was trying to finance a pool with a lease purchase financing mechanism. But by the way that it was structured, similar to a COPS, but a little more simpler than the COPS transaction. But the way it was structured, it was unconditional. So it was over 30 years. The municipality didn't have any right to walk away from the transaction. So the Ohio Supreme Court struck it down as an invalid indebtedness. But the Supreme Court gave us some guidance on how that type of financing could be structured to avoid being considered invalid debt. And basically what the Ohio Supreme Court said was, you got to structure the obligation as a series of one-year leases with each lease subject to renewal upon the ensuing year's lease payment. And so based on that, that guidance from the Ohio Supreme Court, this whole financing mechanism has, like I said, become quite common in the state over the course of the last 40 years. And there's a couple different kinds of mechanisms. I want to talk about the structure in the most simplest terms. And this is a lease financing where you basically just have the local government, like the school district, and a bank, the lender. Under this financing, the local government will enter into a ground lease where it'll lease the property where it wants to build its building to the bank. And the bank will, and the local government will simultaneously enter into a lease purchase agreement under which the school district is going to lease back not only the property on which the building is built, but actually the improvement to that property, the school building or whatever building's being built on that property. So the cash flow under this type of lease financing arrangement is the bank provides the cash at the outset to build the building, and then over the course of the lease, the school district or public entity makes the lease payments to the bank. Again, those are annually appropriated lease payments, so again, we don't consider this indebtedness. Now, I guess one thing I would like to point out, I always have to throw out this caveat, is even though this is subject to annual appropriation, and even though you have the legal right to not appropriate funds for an upcoming lease payment with basically no legal recourse on the part of the lenders, it's not something that you want to do because it would really have dire consequences. First of all, you're going to lose the right to use that property and that building for the remaining lease term, which could be up to 30 years. Additionally, and Mike can talk about this, you basically foreclose any possibility to go into the capital markets again and take out any type of financing, and the rating analysts are going to look at that as the default. So again, it's a legal right that any public entity would have under this mechanism, but again, it's not one that you want to use, and it's just, I guess, a way that we structure these financings based on the guidance from the Ohio Supreme Court, so it's not considered that. Mike's going to talk about the more complicated certificates of participation transaction.
So essentially, before we even get into a further description, by all means, if anyone has any questions, just interject at any time. But most importantly, I'm certain the entire board's asking in the communities, how are we going to do this? How are we going to pay for this? Because this particular transaction does not go to the people for a vote. So it's not backed by the collection of real estate taxes through the county auditor. What we have here, and through hard work that both Austin and myself have conducted with Mr. Rock, we have done some painstaking analysis on his excellent spreadsheets for the accounting of the revenue that's going to actually pay for this transaction. And so behind the scenes, we've been doing quite a bit of work to get things going, to get this transaction ready for market, which we are hoping is going to be in late November. But just like Austin had indicated, the basic premise of the structure is just as if you were to lease a car. You don't own that car until the end of the lease. Now, when you have a leasing of a car, when your lease is done, usually you got to give the car back. We're not going to do that in this circumstance. In these documents and in these lease documents, when this lease is done, we have what are called, and correct me if I'm wrong, reversionary rights. So the district, during these lease for 30-year payments, at the end, the building is yours, the land is yours. Well, it'll be 5 years after those 30 years because the ground lease goes 5 years longer than the lease payments. But in the end, the asset is yours. So as you can see on this particular screen, where I come into play is that we have to select a firm that's going to go out and actually get this money for the district. That's represented with the underwriter square there in this screen. What we basically do is through the underwriter is access investors in the market, and we ask these investors, would you like to participate in these lease payments? Meaning if you want, you give us money, we'll let you get some interest back in your principal through the payments that the district is going to make as on this lease. So that's why we call them certificate holders, not so much bond holders. But essentially what we're going to have done is the district is going to enter into this lease arrangement with what we call a special purpose entity, which is essentially a corporation that's on paper and it's held by Squire, Patton, Boggs. They have representatives who sit on that, and it's all based in the background. That's how the legal status occurs, and the district will lease that facility back from this entity, and there'll be a separation of the ground and the asset. But in the end, everything is the district's. And the reason we have to do this again is this is the way the district is going to participate in this juncture with the OFCC by not burdening the taxpayers here with the entire transaction. The district is going to pay for approximately $15 million through this COP issue. You're going to get co-funded by the state for an additional $8 to $9 million, a number we've been battling around. And then next year, you go for the second phase. That's when you go to the voters. You ask them for the rest, and then the state will give you the rest after that. But let's crawl before we walk, and the crawling here is going to be the COP issue. Oh, sorry, I apologize. So what we're going to do is go out to multiple lenders. It's very similar to issuing a regular bond issue. When I say lenders, those are investors, what we call capital market investors. What I am here for is to make certain that whatever underwriting firm accessing those investors is kept in check. As your municipal advisor, my fiduciary responsibility is to the district, not to the investors. That's what the underwriter is for. I will keep that underwriter in check. I will not allow that underwriter to overprice or inflate the prices of these bonds. I will make certain that these bonds are accurately marketed and marketed at market levels. This is definitely a method in Ohio that has become prominent over the last 15 years. I was on the underwriting side for a long time. I know how they misbehave. So it's up to 30-year term. That means you have 30 years to pay it off. What we will do is also put in these bonds a prepayment option. Unlike your home mortgage, where if you come into any money, you can prepay whenever you want, it's a little more complicated when it comes to bonds. But we do give you one time before what we call the call date, that actual prepayment date, which will be about 7 or 8 years out, to refinance. If you come into extra money, you simply want to pay it off, you can do that. But after those 7 years, then you can start paying down this debt. We are working in conjunction with the city, and by mandate of Mayor Sellers, we want to make certain that given our conservative views on how we're going to repay this issue and the conservative method by which we are assessing our revenues for this issue, we want to make certain if we ever have the opportunity to pay this off early, we will do so.
Yeah, I guess one of the points that I want to hit on again that Michael mentioned was, you know, we keep talking about this as a lease. And I think probably the more appropriate way to think about it is more of an installment sale or installment purchase. Instead of just purchasing an item, though, you're acquiring all the rights in that property over the course of the term of the lease. And again, back to initial point we were making is that we're structuring this in a way that the Ohio Supreme Court, based on their guidance, has said that this is not considered indebtedness. And why is that important? Because if it's not indebtedness, it's not subject to any of the statutory debt limitations or the constitutional debt limitations. So for instance, the 9% debt limitation, the school district, based on its current debt that's outstanding, if it was going to add a bond issue to that debt, it would exceed the 9% debt limitation. So if you're probably thinking, well, how are we going to do the bond issue next year? One of the exceptions to that 9% limitation is if you get the conditional approval for a bond issue from the state, then you get to go over 9% up to 12%. So that's what's going to allow you to proceed on to the ballot next year. But again, back to the current financing we're doing here with the COPS financing, this is not considered indebtedness, so we don't have to worry about either the statutory direct debt limitations or the indirect 10 mil limitation as well. I guess you know, some of the things that we talk about here is that you know, when we think about different types of financing mechanisms for public entities, your most strongest security is the voted bond issue, because that's secured by the full faith and credit of the community. If you didn't have enough money to pay back those bonds, the bondholders can go into court and get what's called writ of mandamus to order the public officials to levy the tax necessary to pay back those bonds. That's the highest form of security. Because it's the highest form of security, it gets the lowest interest rate. I guess one rung down would be limited tax GOs, where you don't go to the voters for approval of the bond issue. This is a very limited financing authority. But in that instance, the ability to repay is guaranteed by your ability to levy a tax within the 10 mil limitation. So once you hit the 10 mil limit, you couldn't levy any more to repay those obligations. Leases, because they're conditional, because they have that subject to annual appropriation structure to them, they're a lesser form of security. So in this instance, because, you know, the COPS holders, this is more in Mike's area, correct me if I'm wrong, because the COPS holders aren't as secure in their payments that they're going to receive them, even though, you know, we're pretty secure in terms of looking at your ability to repay. You do have that right, even though it would be drastic to use it, to walk away from the obligation. Because you have that right, the certificate holders demand a slightly higher interest rate. If you want to speak to kind of the differential to that.
So that is one of the levels of complexity that is added to this transaction, is that it is not your traditional go to the voters, ask for an increase in real estate taxes, use those taxes to repay a bond issue. This is annually appropriated debt. So what's most important is when we take these bonds, and they are bonds, that's how they're issued, even though we call them certificates of participation. When we take these and we go to the market, investors want to know, what are you using this money for? Because you have the legal right to walk away from it. So if you were out there telling them we're going to use it for an athletic facility, performing arts facility, something that's not mission critical, which a term you'll hear quite a bit over the upcoming months, they're not going to like that. We're going to go then, we're funding a pre-K through 5 school. You cannot go without it. You're going to be tearing down your current schools. They are going to know, you know, for lack of a better term, they got you. You're not going to walk away from that asset. You are going to repay these bonds. But because you have that ability, there is a little higher interest rate associated with these. That's going to lead me into discussion in a little bit here, just another slide or two, about credit rating and how we get our best interest rate.
And let's,
So are you saying that the interest rate is not fixed?
It is fixed. It is fixed. When we go out, we will price these bonds, and they will be fixed for 30 years?
Okay.
Good question.
Stay there for 1 second.
Okay.
So, yeah, like Mike was saying, it is like, it's also a good idea to think of this as a bond issue because in many ways, like if you look at it from the outward appearance, it is like a bond issue. It's marketed the same way as a bond issue. The certificates of participation actually look like bonds themselves. Obviously, there's some differences with the real estate aspects of this type of financing, but it is, I think, a good idea to look at it as a bond issue, very similar in many respects. But one of the ways that it's different from our bond issue that we're going to be doing in 2018 or 2019 is that we're statutorily limited to 30 years with our maximum maturity. So that means, you know, for the bond issue, usually a bond issue, you can get out to like 36, 37 years, which is based on the weighted average useful life of the asset that you're financing. Even though in this case, if we looked at the elementary school and we did our weighted average useful life calculation, which is based on some guidance from statutes, we might get out to 36 or 37 years. The statute says for this type of finance, you can only go out 30 years. That means the annual payments are going to be a little higher than if you did it as a bond issue. But based on the modeling that Mike was talking about, that he and Dr. Rock have been working on, I think you're well within your limits in terms of your ability to repay from that contemplated source of revenue. And then the other point that I think Michael's mentioned a couple times that's worth reiterating is, you know, with the bond issue, you're levying that separate tax that's specific for the repayment of principal and interest on the bonds. In this case, you're not levying that additional tax, so you're looking at an existing source of revenue for repayment.
Which is an important point as well, because we have to make certain that we are budgeting well within our means. We don't need to look at, well, how much money do we have to repay these? Well, let's take all of that and throw it at this bond issue. We are not doing that. We are essentially looking at a revenue stream that we work diligently with Dr. Rock to essentially break down and forecast, and we're chopping that in half. So we are only budgeting 50% of that revenue stream for the next 30 years. So that's very important. So we're not going to maximize that. If something else comes up over the next term, you need to do out of your coffers, out of your payments, there's going to be substantial monies there to do that if you so desire. We are not going to strap you down and really restrict you from utilizing those revenues down the road, which is very important, which leads us into what we need to talk to about your credit rating. I think we...
Let me mention these
Certainly.
quick. So, you know, one thing, one of the differences with the bond issue, like I was saying, is that this is real estate based. So by entering into this type of financing with respect to this elementary school, I don't think this will be an issue for the district, but you do lose flexibility with that building. So you're committing for a period of 30 years to use that as an elementary school building. Again, I think this is something that's part of the district's facilities plan, so I don't think you're contemplating any change to that facility. But you are locked in for 30 years for the use of that building. I have seen some other districts where they've entered into one of these COPS financings, and then 5 or 10 years down the road, 15 years down the road, they decide that they want to kind of go do it like a campus setting for all of their schools, and they're stuck. So that's just something to keep in the back of your mind. We want you to be fully apprised of all the differences between the bond issue and the COPS issue, and all, I guess, various risks, even though they are pretty minimal. The other thing that we're going to do some title work and survey work and recording work for this to make sure the property is free and clear. Obviously, it's been used for an elementary school building since the beginning of time, so I'm not anticipating any problems there. Also, I don't think we'll have to do the environmental study again because this has been used as a elementary school for a long period of time. Michael and I worked on a financing recently where the school district was purchasing an auto body shop, and so it was very complicated. We had to go through the environmental study. It came back that there was gas wells on the property, so it became a huge headache. Fortunately for you, you guys are doing something very conventional here, so I don't think you have to worry about that. And lastly, I guess it's worth mentioning again, is the potential loss of possession. If you don't appropriate the funds to make the lease payments, you do lose possession of that property for the remaining period of the lease, and as Michael said, plus 5 years. So if you lost possession of the property, the trustee is going to come in, exclude you from the property, try to relet that property to another party to make revenue to pay the certificate holders. Again, not expecting that to happen, just want you to be fully apprised of all the intricacies of this type of financing.
We want to make certain that you go in this with your eyes wide open. We're not keeping anything from the knowledge that you need to know to go into this transaction. They're very commonly used, though. One thing we definitely want to make certain that we impress upon you is that this is not some type of one-off concocted notion of a transaction. We have a slide in here that actually talks about how many people and how many districts have utilized it.
I have a quick question. Not that it will happen to us, but if by some unfortunate circumstance we were not able to make an annual payment, is the bond set so that the building could be used by any entity, or does it follow what we have to do with current school buildings now and only able to be used by another, like a charter school?
That's a good question.
Yeah, it could be used for any purpose at that point, yeah. So it's open. The trustee, obviously it's an elementary school, so its uses is limited. Potential uses are limited, so, but the trustee, again, this has never happened in Ohio, to be honest with you. There's only one default that I can think of, Twinsburg Township, and they were able to resolve it at some point. But, theoretically, how it would work is the trustee comes in, excludes you from the property, tries to relet it to another party to generate revenue on that property. But it's also important to point out that you're not giving a mortgage. So this isn't like the trustee comes in and they take possession of it, they foreclose on it, and they try to sell it. Their rights are limited to that term of that lease plus 5 years. So their ability to relet that to another party would just be for that period of time. At the end of that time, you guys get the property back.
I have a question. You mentioned the 15 million going through the COP, then the other 8 to 9 to the state. Then you said the voters passed phase 2. If the voters do not pass phase 2, then what happens next? Because you can't go to the state, correct, if you don't the voters don't pass?
Right, let's say we were to do this particular transaction, the state would co-fund this transaction for approximately $9 million on top of the 15 put by the board and the district. If you don't pass phase 2, at that point, this particular project is not linked financially to the second phase of the project. So this project could stand alone on its own, even without passage of phase 2. You got anything on that question?
Well, and I guess my second question to that is that if it's not gonna be linked and you really don't need it, why will we ask the voters to increase?
Well, the whole master capital plan, as put through the OFCC, they have determined that not only do you need a new pre-K through 5, but the high school as well as the campus in total could utilize an entire improvement.
Basically what the OFCC, Ohio Facilities Construction Commission is doing here is they're segmenting the project for you. Which is, I think, beneficial to the school district, because if you didn't do it as a segment, you would have to go to the voters, get approval, pass the COPS issue, and roll all of this into one. But if you didn't get if the voters didn't pass it, you couldn't peel off this segment at that point. You would have to wait until you get your entire pot of money coming from the COPS issue, coming from the bond issue, before the state would kick in their money. So what the state has done is, because I think there's been some deferrals about when you would go on the ballot, what the state has decided to do is say, let's do this COPS issue as an earlier segment to get things moving, and then come back hopefully in July, give you what's called conditional approval, which gives you that exception to get on the ballot, hopefully go to the ballot in November of 2018. Hopefully the voters pass it, and then continue with the rest of the project.
One of the other reasons we are instituting this phasing or this segmentation is that it has been discussed by the board and the district in total that they want to try to, in essence, share this financing burden with the taxpayers. If we didn't do this COPS, we would have to go to the taxpayers for the entire amount. And that would be a substantial real estate tax add. So the district wants to step back, help with this portion. It's exactly the strategy we just utilized in Fairview Park in December, and then just earlier this year. Also, interest rates right now are exceptionally low. If we are to do just as what Austin was indicating and having to wait till all next year, we are gonna miss a tremendous window, especially for this, in as much that this already has to be paid back at a level of higher interest rates than the regular bond that the district taxpayers will vote for. So right now, we are at exceptional levels. Can't foretell the future, but what we are hoping, and based on what we've heard and being in the market quite a bit this year, these levels hopefully will maintain. Talk of war, I don't want to sound like a warmonger, but it helps. Talk of war has driven rates down in this entire week because investors get spooked. Their talk of war, they don't know what's going to happen to the companies they invest in. They take their money out of the stock market and they put it in the bond market. And when prices go up, because everyone wants it, your interest rates fall down. And that's what's happening right now. We just priced a transaction today for Wadsworth City Schools, and our timing couldn't have been better. So we are a couple of months away from doing the transaction, but the Federal Reserve has already indicated that they're only going to do one more increase of interest rates this year, and we believe that these levels have been priced in by the market. So we're hoping to maintain these levels, but by this time next year, there's only one way to go, and that's up. So we're kind of hedging the market, if you will. Okay. So, as I had indicated, and we don't want to take up much more of your time by all means, but this is not a one-off transaction. Brown Stadium, $140 million in this very security asset type was utilized for financing. Berea Schools, Cincinnati Schools did the largest on the school side, $120 million. We've done them for Wadsworth Schools, Willoughby Eastlake Schools. The entire state has done this type of transaction. It is very highly utilized. You will be the second district in the state to utilize this type of funding to get your money from the state. So you're kind of a trailblazer in that, and it's something that we will tout. We will certainly make certain that everyone knows that because it is somewhat unique. And we've been working, again, a lot with Mr. Rock and his finances to get the transaction enhanced. So that's where I'm going to go to real quickly, your bond ratings. Just like if you were to go to a bank, ask for a loan, go to a bank, ask for a mortgage, to get any type of credit, to buy a car, they look at your personal credit rating. School districts, municipalities carry the same type of credit ratings. Now, because of the situation here in Warrensville Heights, you're cash rich. You've got a nice carryover balance. We feel that's going to work to your benefit. Obviously, there is a deficiency in collections here. That's going to be kind of a red flag. These are all different pieces of data that we will put together in a presentation to go and ask the rating agencies to give us a rating on these bonds. They will collect multiple avenues of data in order to come up with that. Socioeconomic, financial, enrollment. Well, everything here is a positive story. The negative things, we're not going to hide them. We will address them. But we will make certain that we have a plan on how to mitigate them and to address them. So what we have here real quickly in slide 13 is a chart of what we call the credit rating chart between Moody's and Standard & Poor's. We've yet to not determine which rating agency we will go to. That is something we will have decided in further discussions. So what we believe right now, where Warrensville Heights will fall, is within this area in the A1, A2, A3, A+, A minus. The column on the left is Moody's designations. The column on the right is Standard & Poor's. An A1 is identical to an A+, an A2 to an A, and A3 to an A minus. We want to try to avoid falling within this area, which is the Baa1, triple B+. It is still considered investment grade, but there are not too many districts in the state that carry those ratings. There are only a handful. And that's, in the eyes of the investors, it's somewhat of a distressed rating. We do believe, and I believe strongly, that we are going to fall within this single A category around the A3, A2, A minus range. Now, having said that, what we are going to do with this bond issue is have it insured. So essentially we will pay a firm that will wrap this bond issue and tell bond holders that in the event the district cannot make the payment, they have another fallback, and that's gonna be the bond insurance. So by doing such, is what we call a programmatic rating. The district will get itself rated no matter what. Let's just assume it's an A3. We'll get this issue wrapped, so when it goes to market, investors look at it, it's gonna be a double A
Right.
or a double A2. You'll pay for that rating, and it will be associated with that particular transaction. We intend to, for the transaction that's voted by for the people, to get free enhancement through the state. The state does not enhance lease revenue transactions. Now, we've been working with Dr. Rock on this very front, and we have been given, I'll call it a loose green light on credit committee from one bond insurer. There's only two we're gonna talk to. So that was very positive news. There's a lot of legal, I'm just gonna call it mumbo jumbo that we're not gonna get into tonight, that they have a problem with because of the OFCC. But we have cleared that language with this bond insurer. And based upon our preliminary analysis, financial analysis, legal analysis, they have come to an already comfort level with this credit. That's very good news. That saves the district close to $1 million in repayment interest.
And I'm sorry, you said their credit rating was what?
It would be a double A2
Double
or a
A2.
double A enhanced rating. This slide just kind of delineates the difference in rating and expense between a voted issue versus a COPS issue. You can examine that in your packet when you so wish. Again, some examples of school districts that have utilized this particular funding. Sometimes they go out and get a permanent improvement levy by which they'll pay for this transaction. We have TIF revenue coming into the district through the expansive economic development transactions that have been conducted on behalf of the city and mayor sellers, so that money flows through the district. So I want to thank Austin and Dr. Rock for helping me put this together. This was really Austin's presentation, and really late today, he made me tweak it. So we were able to get it all together. Okay, so the timeline.
Yep.
This is something that's exactly, thank you, Austin, I appreciate that. So, October 26th, the controlling board meets for the OFCC. That's not gonna be your official approval for conditional approval, though. They won't meet to sign off on your conditional approval for the segmentation in order to get your co-funding on this till mid-November. We're talking, I think, November 14th. It'll be before Thanksgiving.
Yeah, we'll find out the exact date within a week.
But let's just move backwards from an assumed date of November 14th for conditional approval. Due to the advice, and I think it's very good advice from council, we don't want to do anything until we've gotten that signature from OFCC. Let's be honest, we've been through with them before. Once they have their signature on that conditional approval, there's no going back. So moving backwards into October, we have to put together a disclosure statement, and that's what Austin's firm is here to do.
I brought a prop. This is the, it's called the preliminary, actually, this is the offering circular. So it's the disclosure statement. So we're going to work with Dr. Rock and Mr. Jolly on preparing this. So it includes information about the security for the issue, and then a lot of information about the school district academics, but mostly weighted towards the economics and financial position of the school district. So it's actually a nice product to have for the school district because it's a good way to learn about the school district and what's going on here.
And does that go to potential investors?
Correct, yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought.
So-
Go to the rating analysts, go to the investors.
Okay.
Anyone ever had invest in a mutual fund to get a prospectus?
Yep. That's our
exactly what that is.
prospectus. Okay.
Exactly what that is. That this is how we're gonna inform your potential investors, how they're gonna come up with what they consider to be your credit worthiness is all gonna be in this preliminary offering circular. So in order to have this though, what we need to do is we're gonna go and present to the rating agencies as well as the bond insurers. And we're gonna have a presentation that my firm will put together, and we'll take a contingent, and we'll go and talk to them. That's gonna occur probably in mid-October. Because what I'd like to have is by the end of October, is to have our rating established, We will have a fully functional version of the preliminary offering circular, and by then, we will have a bid from a bond insurer. And we will know exactly how much it's gonna cost. So, at that juncture, we wait. They meet on October 26th. Let's just say they meet on November 14th then, sign off on your conditional approval. The day they sign, we mail this prospectus to all potential investors. We will then price your bond issue, and that's fixing those rates. So no variable rate. We will go out on one day, and we will fix all the rates for this transaction. That will be late November, early December. And then 3 weeks later, you're gonna have your money. That'll be mid-December.
Then at that point, once you have your money in hand, the state sees you have your money in hand, they contribute their money into the pot, and you sign the project agreement with the state at that time.
In September, we will be conducting interviews with potential underwriting firms. So that's the next major date that I'd like to get from Dr. Rock and find out who would like to participate in those interviews. Now, you can, if you wish, do what we call a request for proposal. I do not suggest that, because everything that comes back is BS. They all tell you the same thing. I know everyone, as does Austin, at all these firms. We know how they operate. We need to conduct a comfort level between you and the underwriter, and that's gonna be face-to-face. We may ask them to present certain things, an agenda for these interviews, but we will conduct that with at least 4 firms, that we will determine the 4 best in the state.
So I have a question,
Sure.
and just, I'm thinking, I know these are bonds, but when you work with the investors, when that paper is written, is it similar to commercial paper?
Some of the commercial paper only goes for, I believe, 280 days tops.
Okay.
Commercial paper is what they consider kind of, liquid investment because it's so short. Now, there will be aspects to this bond issue where there will be a potential for investors to buy bonds that mature in a year or 2 years. In that regard, in what we call that area of the yield curve, yes, it would be very similar to commercial paper. And it'll be, the interest rate on those bonds will resemble that because it'll be less than 1% because it's so short in maturity.
Okay,
Commercial paper doesn't have as much regulation as does this.
okay.
Commercial paper widely utilized, I don't, Mike, you may be in some commercial paper now, okay. But it is widely utilized, investment vehicle, for districts to put, money aside for a short term to get some type of. So once we conduct those interviews and we decide the underwriting firm, that'll be done, let's call it mid-September. Then after that, we work on the POC, the preliminary offering circular.
Let me just chime in. One other step, I'm not sure if my colleague Rick Maniloff mentioned it to you when he was before you last time, but in September, we're gonna be coming to you with the authorizing resolution for the transaction. Not sure if it's gonna be at the work session or at the actual regular meeting, but that's gonna authorize the transaction. And again, it sets the parameters, the broad parameters, for the transaction, like maximum principal amount, maximum term, maximum interest rate, and it delegates a lot of authority to Dr. Rock when we come to the pricing date in November to fill in the blanks, to actually set the terms of the transaction.
I have a couple of questions. You made mention about a deficiency in collections. So you're referring to the fact that there's just difficulty getting collections from different businesses? Is that what you're saying?
For real estate taxes.
Taxes.
in general.
Resident.
Yes, President.
Our
So
real
it's
estate
mostly
collection rate,
So that will, you're saying that's a negative impact or just a disadvantage?
It's a negative, it's definitely a negative red flag on behalf of the credit profile of the district.
But Mike, that has increased. I mean,
It has increased, it's on the uptick. I really only highlight that because that's the kind of information that the credit agencies are gonna look at. And it's stuff that we need to be prepared to answer. For instance, we'll be in a very similar fashion as this, and they would say, well, we noticed your credit collections were at this percentage, what's going on? The last thing you wanna say is, oh, boy, yeah, we just noticed that. That's not gonna work. We're gonna know exactly how to answer that. We're gonna let them know that it's on the increase. We're gonna let them know what we're doing to make those collections more fluid and more efficient. And for the main part, we will say, yes, there is a certain level of efficiency on those collection rates, and we're working toward getting those taken care of.
So will they come back and say, like, I know you mentioned that 50% of our revenue that's coming in, you're only gonna, I guess bargain off 50% of our revenue. So what happens if, for some reason, say one of our major revenue sources goes belly up? What does that do to us in terms of the lease?
Well, I mean, we will have to, if something happens where the revenue source, for whatever reason, goes away, we have to make certain that we find a way to either substitute it or look into other areas where we can find that money. Thus, we're only levying, or I shouldn't say levying, it's probably not the right term,
50%.
given the legal standards, but that's why we're only utilizing 50% of that revenue stream.
Okay.
Mind you, right now, like I said, the district is cash rich. You have a carryover balance of substantial monies. So that is gonna be a huge positive for the credit agency. If we were going in this and you had a carryover balance of a few $1 million, but you were hoping revenues were gonna come in for the next 30 years, and we wanted to finance something for $15 million, they're gonna say, what are you thinking? And I'd be the first to say, we need to rethink this strategy. This strategy is sound, it is conservative, and we believe well within the means of the district to finance this facility.
And one final question, and you guys may have addressed this before, but how do you guys get paid?
Out of the proceeds of the issue.
Okay, so this is once you finish doing the wheeling and dealing and it's signed, then you get your payment?
Correct. If, for instance, we decide that the construction fund required for this issue is $15 million, that's the number you want to give to the architect, we've got $15 million here to go build this facility along with the state money. We will issue bonds at $15 million plus the needed expenses, 15.2, 15.3. There are a number of third-party vendors associated with these transactions. It is not unique to this transaction. There will be bond counsel, underwriters counsel, trustee, registrar, municipal advisor, rating agency. There's a long list of individuals involved with these transactions.
Credit enhancement. It's like your
Credit
closing
enhancement.
fees. It's like your closing costs.
Plus the interest rate.
All those
Yeah,
costs
well,
are paid at
It's
closing,
paid
they're
at
done.
closing.
The interest rate is paid over 30.
Over the time.
It's only paid on the physical,
Total amount.
yeah, thank you.
Whatever's borrowed,
Yeah,
interest
that's
is
what
paid.
paid
Right.
off, correct.
Simple as that.
Total.
Yeah.
The other part of this, though, that you have, though, which was a great question, you said, what if? When we had the new building, remember, we have 3 buildings that are coming off, 1 new one that's coming on, and the new one is gonna be more efficient. It's not gonna be as much as a drag. There may be some payroll savings. So we're gonna have a lot of things interacting with each other.
That will offset.
Yes.
And I think that's probably gonna be part of the story that you tell the rating analysts. One of the examples we had up there was Berea City School District. I worked with them on their COPS financing, and they made that argument to them. They said, we're replacing, I forget what it was, 3 or 4 inefficient elementary schools with 1 very efficient elementary schools. And, part of the savings that we're gonna realize from that is gonna be, be freed up to help us pay back some of the principal interest on the costs.
So when we go to tell our story, when we're doing our presentation, we talk about our fund balance. We talk about that savings of new buildings. Obviously, we talk about the need of the new buildings. But then, more importantly, we talk about the developments of the new abatements that are coming in that haven't hit our books yet that we're projecting. So that's revenue on the gain side. And then the 5th thing that we talk about, though, is that we are utilizing a revenue source that's about $2 million that comes into the district, the pilot payments. We're only using half of that.
Right.
And it's in our 5-year forecast right now already. We've earmarked that already. So it's in our projections. And with that in those projections, the biggest thing is we have that carryover fund balance.
So is that all we're using is the pilot, the funding from the pilot, so the rest of the revenue sources are not touched at
They're
all?
not in there.
Not at all. And that helps us get the financing also.
Okay.
Whenever,
Without that pilot stream, we wouldn't have suggested this route.
they'd be asking your exact question. They'd be saying, oh, what about if you had to hire more teachers, or, you know, by having a strict revenue stream that you could tie this to and finance against. I had a district where we did a project, it wasn't a COPS financing, but we tied the project to these billboards that were being leased on the district property. And you'll never believe this, the bank accepted uneven payments with the balloon payments at the end. I mean, how often do you go and get a mortgage on your house and you say, well, I'm gonna pay $100 a month, and then in the last 2 years, I'll give you $200,000. That's what this was. But the reason they did that is because we tied it to one revenue stream, and that was the collateral that financed it. So that's what we're putting there with this.
Mind you, Austin, you could probably comment on this. When we tell them this, you're not legally bound.
Yeah, that's, you can't, if you were to say the security for these cops is going to be that revenue stream, that would be something that a court or auditors can look at and say, okay, what you have here now is debt, because you obligated that revenue stream to the repayment. So technically, you have flexibility. But, you know, the story that you're telling the rating analysts, and you really don't want to deviate from this in practice, is this is how we're planning on repaying those obligations.
So, you word this carefully, and this is my final question. So, Dr. Rock, you know we've got some other legal issues that are
Yes.
going on. So, what if those things don't play out the way, you know, we hope? How would that impact what we're doing?
That's another reason that we're using the 50%, because it's leaving another 50%.
I guess it's just.
So
I don't know.
basically, we're leaving, only using half. We're leaving wiggle room for any contingency,
Yes.
so that we could pick it up in the event anything crazy happens. We're not leveraging any of the new revenue that we've just signed off on over this year.
Nope.
None at all. So we've got a lot of wiggle room in the event of some unforeseen catastrophe.
Yes.
Plus, you have the carryover balance.
Correct. Well, that's not, I'm not even just looking at the
Right.
carryover, just the revenue that
Right.
we haven't even tapped into.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what I like to hear. That's what the rating agencies want to hear.
Yeah.
But we must remember, as really, in the end of the day, if you wanted to, you could write a check for this.
Right,
You don't want to. You want to leverage that money.
Right.
Money stays in your coffers.
right. That way we make money off of our money.
And the category of the revenue that we're utilizing is below the revenue that's at question.
And like Mike said, the bond companies are gonna look at that. They're gonna look at the revenue streams that we have, because if we couldn't even afford it, they wouldn't even talk to us.
Right.
If you couldn't afford it,
You all
guys
wouldn't be
we
here.
would not be here.
No,
Thank you.
Both Austin
Not
and
at
I
all.
would say to you, hey, this is not gonna work.
right.
Any other questions for the two gentlemen? I want to thank you, Mike. I want to thank you, Austin. I know you've been working with this district for a year and a half, and Dr. Rock and Mr. Jolly, but I appreciate all the input, and tell Rick and the rest of them, thanks for all the work you guys
Will
do.
do. It's been a pleasure. Look forward to continuing with you.
And Mr. Jolly would like to speak on the.
No, well, we met with the OFCC
Oh,
this
yeah.
week, and the OFCC wants to start the process with the architect, of finding the architect. I did provide you the timeline that the OFCC provided us, and a sample of the RFQ that they're gonna put out. When we agreed in May to start this process, we co-partnering with them, and they're starting the process of getting the architect. The timing of this is as the money is deposited into the accounts, that we can start the process of design the building. This timeline has us in the move-in date of July 2020, with work beginning in the first of the year. So this is a co-funded, selection of the architect. So there will be, our team here in Warrensville will score, the state will score, and then it'll be a group of finalists. Once their finalists are together, the total group will interview the finalists, and then after that interview, together, the selection of the architect will be made. So I wanted to inform the board, because this process is running simultaneously with our attempts to secure the funding for the first phase of the project.
And bond counsel will be there also to review all of the architectural contracts to make sure it's all legal and in compliance.
What I'm hearing is you guys are getting ready to go out for this RFQ. And you said something about an RFP, but you don't recommend, was that for bond
That's
counsel?
for bond
Underwriters.
Underwriters,
bond
okay.
underwriters. That pool has shrunk over the last year. I've worked for 2 or 3 of the firms already. Both Austin and I are well aware of who the players are. And I think, sometimes bond counsel isn't a part of those interviews. I fully have no problem if Austin wanted to sit in on those, because I really think the more people there, the more we can bounce questions off each other. But they all do the same function. They all operate at a similar level. But we will go ahead and we have a matrix that I'll put together for you with the questions they answer, of the questions we ask and how they answer them. And then we're going to ask them for data in these presentations. We want to see hard, full data. So the main thing is you need to get a comfort level. Some of them are going to come in and just talk about how great they are. Some of them are going to come in and make a connection. You're going to be working with these people for the next couple of years. You want to make certain they're there when you call them. I'm the interim. I'm the call you make. So we just need to make certain that you're comfortable with them. I will give you my input. We will collectively come up with a decision.
So how will you solicit for these people to do proposals there? Are they just people that, how do you solicit?
I'll send an email, copy Dr. Rock, copy Mr. McGuan, and say we are gonna go through a underwriter selection process. We will be interviewing 4 firms on this particular date. Within your presentation, we are gonna require this list of information.
And it's not like it's an undying list, it's public finance. So there's so many institutions that do public finance, and then it gives even further, Ms. Mitchell knows this, that it even gets further, do they do public finance and bonds?
Or cops, yeah.
Okay.
Or
All
cops.
right. I don't want to be insulting. I was just, didn't want it to be some
Oh, no,
some
that's,
good
that
old
was a great question.
network.
Oh,
No,
no,
I-
that's
so-
exactly
No.
what I'm here to avoid,
Yeah,
is the
so-
good avoid.
Okay.
That's what Mr. Priscilla's doing for us, is he's making sure we're getting a good deal,
Right.
Yep.
that they're
Right.
not increasing cost on us. That's why you have a municipal
We're gonna
funded.
If
keep
it,
our
if, yeah,
expenses down.
to bring it to our level, a number of banks do public financing.
Right.
KeyBank, PNC, they all do public financing. And so those are those entities that they will solicit. They send out the RFP. They'll ask, they do have to respond to a number of questions. And then based on those responses, you guys then will sit down, I'm assuming with the team, and they'll go through that process, they'll review and fully vet to see which institution is the best institution for us to partner with.
Ms. Mitchell, it was my contention that we circumvented the RFP process.
Right.
And just, I will provide you a list of the firms that I believe are going to be worthy of
Yeah,
just talking.
You're
It
preaching to the
saves
choir
your
with
time.
me, I understand,
Okay,
yeah, I get that.
It saves time, it saves trees, it's a lot of paper, it's a lot of BS.
Right.
They'll sit there and tell you they're the greatest things since
Yep.
sliced bread. I know exactly
Ow.
what they are.
Well,
If
You're
you'd
right.
rather not do that, Ms. Smith, I am here.
Oh, it's not
at
my
your
decision.
No, it's a
But-
board, but
Yeah.
we can wrap it up.
It's a poor decision.
I get it.
I appreciate you
Definitely.
you guys answering my questions, so.
Thank you guys so much, I appreciate it.
Okay,
Okay.
excellent.
Thank you
Thanks
so
Thank you.
much.
Good questions. Thank you.
Next on our board agenda is 2 Treasurer's Budget and Finance Review. Dr. Rock, do you have anything in this Treasurer Budget Finance?
No, sir.
Okay. Next on our board agenda is, huh?
I have a question for the treasurer.
Go right ahead. It's
Dr.
not on
Rock.
agenda, but.
That's okay. Dr.
Okay.
Rock. Just before we came to the board meeting, our president was on the news announcing that he was going to be cutting all schools in Ohio's budget.
Is that Trump?
That would be our president.
I didn't know if you.
He ain't my president, but I mean,
Oh, no.
he ain't my
Oh,
president.
Well, he can't cut nobody's budget. Were you
I
aware
would
of
never
that?
try to.
Were you aware of that?
Yes.
Okay. Can you tell me, how is that going to impact us of the monies that we already have coming in? Because it's supposed to go into effect for this school year.
Yes. It's going to affect individual funds,
Okay.
state funds, state grants, individual ones. It's not a cut across the board.
Okay.
Where it says if you were getting $1 million, everything's being cut 20%. It depends, it's program dependent.
So I
Right.
guess as a follow-up, just to
Oh, I'm sorry,
confirm,
go ahead.
none of our programs are gonna be impacted, or will they be?
Oh, yeah, some of them are.
Okay.
We just have to wait till the final allocation
Okay.
numbers come out from the state.
Okay.
Now, does that go back to in January when I went to Washington to the advocacy thing and they talked about Title I and Title III funds? Is that,
Yes.
okay.
Those are state funds, those are
Okay,
state
because
grants.
they had
Title
talked
I,
about cutting, they
Title
talked about in
III.
January, that they were gonna be cutting Title III and part of Title I. So I was just wondering where that impacts it at since.
IDEA, Title II, but if you read into the action by the president, it's the funds that they are cutting are funds that, according to the federal government, that aren't performing as well, to where they're sending money there and the grants aren't performing the way that they expect them. That's why it's not across the board. It's individual funds where they have data that says, we're putting grants this way, it's not performing like we expected it, so now we're gonna cut it, those programs.
So for us, because we use a lot of those fundings, does that mean that we'll have to start using part general fund and part of that, whatever they don't cut, to make it up, the difference?
Potentially.
Okay.
I don't anticipate that, at least in the first current year, because we have carryover balances from the state fund.
Rather not dip into our general fund.
Yeah, no, we have carryover balances from our state funds. In fact, we get enough funding where it's difficult for us to spend it all, to be totally honest with you.
Thank you, Dr. Rock. Number 3 on the board agenda is consent superintendent's recommendation and board action, administrative, certified, and classified staff. Superintendent Jelly.
Yes, I appreciate the board vote on these issues. These are important positions to start school. 3.1 is the resignations of Latondra Everhart and Consolidate Townsend. 3.2 is another group of resignations, certified staff. 3.3 is the employment of assistant principal Vicky Sorrells to replace Latondra Everhart. 3.4 is the employment of a supervisor of food service, Mr. Matthew Heinel. I would like to thank Maisha Williams for her service. She's not here, but in the interim, she helped out when Jackie left. Matt interviewed with our team. Matt has a background in food service, has a degree in food service, and we believe will do a great job. 3.5 is employment of new teachers. These are replacements. 3.6 is secretary. This is for the secretary at Westwood. 3.7 is the retirement of Pam Hughes. Pam Hughes has petitioned the board to work another year at Eastwood. So this is to amend her retirement. 3.8 is a bus driver, again a replacement. 3.9 is head custodian at the high school. This is a internal promotion. Michelle Doss will be coming from the middle school to be the high school head custodian.
Thank you, Superintendent Jolly. Normally in our work session, we don't like to vote as much. We would have to vote this time, board, due to the opening of the school and some of these positions that is needed. So before I take a motion, is there any of these items, board, that you would like to pull or vote on them separately before I make the motion for 3.0?
I have one question.
Go right ahead.
Yes,
No
ma'am.
questions, we have to do the motion first.
Right.
No, you can have questions and then have a
No,
motion.
you have to do the motion first, and then we discuss what's our questions.
Stress it, but
Yeah.
would you want to pull them? I'm just asking if you guys want to do them separately.
No, you can ask after we do the motion, yeah.
Open to you.
Oh,
I would need a motion for number 3, consent superintendent's recommendation for board action, administrative, certified, and classified staff. 3.1, 3.2, 3.3, 3.4, 3.5, 3.6, 3.7, 3.8, and 3.9. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to move that this board vote by consent agenda, superintendent's recommendations for board action, administrative, certified, and classified staff. 3.1, 3.2, 3.3, 3.4, 3.5, 3.6, 3.7, 3.8, and 3.9.
Do I have a second?
I second.
Moved by Vice President Mitchell, second by Board Member Gator. The floor is open, board, for questions, Ms. Buman.
No, I was just gonna ask Mr. Jolly a quick question regarding, Pam Hughes' retirement. Re- Did you did you hire another, a teacher to start in her place?
No,
Oh,
we
okay.
didn't hire anybody starting their place.
Oh, okay.
Okay, well, I got a couple questions.
Go ahead.
Where we at here? For your bus driver,
3.8.
Mr. Jolly, the bus driver, that,
Mm-hmm.
was that not on the agenda at the last meeting that we replaced the bus driver? Are we replacing another bus driver? Is this an addition? Are we hiring extras?
We're not hiring extras. I defer to Ms. Hunt on that one. Ms. Hunt, can you explain?
Bus driver?
Michael Lewis.
Michael Lewis,
She initially tried to retire this day, resign at that.
But our last meeting, we replaced Ms. Miles because I asked a question about how she was in two different spots, and you stated because she was still working through July, but we did vote to hire someone to replace her. So are you saying that that person resigned as well, and now this one is gonna replace the second one? Okay, thank you.
I'll send the board the exact name of who the replacement is tomorrow.
My second question is, we're having hiring a secondary head custodian. Where's the first primary head custodian? But now, going back to the last agenda, the gentleman that was on there that replaced me then, we had somebody on there as well.
We didn't have anybody replace Mario Blue.
So that was just just an error?
No,
He retired.
McDaniel.
yeah, you look at the agenda, we didn't vote on.
Am I-
Yeah, we have it up.
And then my other question is, we're hiring another secretary. Are we not full of a lot of secretaries that somebody could have been moved around, or?
So we lost a lot of secretaries too. We lost Rhonda. Who else did we leave? We lost Miss Griffin.
But you replaced, Alexis wasn't a secretary. I mean, yes, she was, but those were replacements. Those were already placed. So my question just remains, just ask.
We're at the current levels because we didn't replace Rhonda. So this hire is the replacement for Rhonda.
Okay.
We just moved the allocation.
Correct. And to answer the question about the bus drivers on the last agenda, we replaced Alfred Miles and Gregory Barker with Letitia Ragland and
I
Vanessa
can't hear
Sparks.
you.
We replaced Alfred Miles and Gregory Barker with Letitia Ragland and Vanessa Sparks.
Right, well, that was my question. You just said what I just asked.
I know, but you're asking, we replaced others.
No.
Go ahead.
So this is correct.
Correct.
Two more.
Right.
Supervisor.
Supervisor.
So this is right. This is right. This is right.
Thank you.
I have one quick question.
Mhm.
So Pam Hughes, did she end up working through the end of the school year?
She did.
So she had initially said, yeah, I
Right.
want to resign, and then she changed her mind, and so now we're just formally putting it on the agenda.
Yes.
Got it, okay.
Right.
I kind of thought that was the case, I just wanted to make sure.
Any other questions about any of these items? Dr. Rock, would you please call the roll?
Mrs. Moomin,
Yes.
Mrs. Elba,
Yes.
Mrs. Gator,
Yes.
Ms. Mitchell?
Yes.
Mr. Freeman?
Yes, motion carries 5-0. Number 4, Superintendent Jolly, there's nothing in the recommendation presentation for personnel and program. Next on our board agenda is board policy review. The revised policy is 5460, and it's a first reading, and this is graduation, correct?
Yes, this is graduation requirements.
You can have the floor, Superintendent Jolly.
So in this policy, our recommendations is that we take option 2, which establishes what our requirements are to graduate, the 21 units that students must have in order to graduate, and also the students must pass.
Do you have a copy of that?
I give everybody a copy. Option 2, in which students have to pass the required credits as designated by our school district, and also the testing requirements. Students do have 3 different ways to meet the requirements, the testing requirements for graduation. That's a cumulative score of 18 on end of course exam, the required points on the work keys exam, and a remediation-free score on the ACT or SAT. Also, with the option 2, but this is just for all. In this one, I just went through the scores. We elected to have a physical education waiver. So this is for any student who participates in sports, that they can get their physical education credit based on the sports. The rest of the policy just talks about how credit is earned and so forth. I did want to speak to the class of 2018 who have two separate options this year to graduate, along with the 18, getting the 18 credit hours, the industry recognized credential on the work readiness, and the ACT score. This group, just this year only, have the opportunity that they must pass all their curriculum requirements, so they must have their credits. If they receive the 1 or 2 on the math or English exam, they must retake, but then they get options. They have to do 2 of the following. They must have attendance of 93% during the 12th grade year, a GPA of 2.5 or higher during the 12th grade year, complete a capstone project during the 12th grade that the district or school defines, that'll be the senior project. During the 12th grade year, community service hours over 120, earn 3 or more college credit plus at any time in high school. So if they earn 3 or more college credit plus credits, that would be one of the 2 that they could use. Earn a 3 or higher on the AP exam. That's irrelevant to us because we have AP. And we did have 2 students this year who earned a 3 on the AP history exam. Earn a state-approved industry-recognized credential or credentials that equal at least 3 points. So those are our kids in the career tech programs. And the last one is to meet Ohio Jobs Readiness Seal. Those have not been developed. The second option is for students in the career technical program. They must also have their credits. And they also must finish at least 4 technical, career technical courses in a single pathway. And then they must complete at least 1 of the following. Earn a total score of proficient or better based on all career technical exams or test modules. Earn an industry credential or credentials that equal 12 points, or complete a workplace experience totaling 250 hours with evidence of positive evaluations. So that's like school to work, where they are working half the day. So with this, the students this year have these exemptions to pass, to graduate, but our policy provides the flexibility for these exceptions, and then it goes to the class of 2019 who are strictly with the 3 different pathways.
Okay, so I have a question.
Mhm.
The biennial budget bill, I don't see that in here. Is that because that's coming from the Department of Ed, which are part of the pathways that we must follow, that I don't see in here?
I'm sorry, they're here, the pathways. If you look on page 4, wait, let me see.
And while you're looking for that, my second question is, we are required to inform parents of any and all changes. If you recall this, we did this with, when you wanted to do uniforms when you were principal. We're required to have 3 separate meetings. When is that plan going to start? Because we don't want to get to a point where we're looking at April and May and somebody's child has not met this requirement because they were not sure of what was going on.
So I will talk to Principal Reynolds to see when those meetings are held. I do know the 9th grade orientation meeting, they did go over what the graduation requirements are, and I will have that information as soon as possible.
Okay, so I didn't see what you were speaking
The
of.
pathways are, let me find them.
You're talking about the pathways in this.
Yeah, how they get it. It's in the opening paragraph where it's in the green. It says for the class of 2018 above, a diploma should be awarded to students meeting the curriculum credit requirements who achieve one of the following 3 options: a cumulative passing score with the required number of points in each area on intercourse exams, earn the required points on work keys assessment, and improved industry recognized credential, or earn a remediation-free score in English, language arts, and mathematics on the ACT or SAT, subject to the limitations on assessments as outlined below. So that locks in what the 3 pathways are for graduation. It's required as part of the policy.
But there are certain numbers, like, that we need to be informing people that there's a completion of 120 of work experience or community service. That is a requirement that we need to put in here in addition to.
So this is only for this year, though, that these students have these help. Right,
This is for this year,
right, this is this year only.
for 120 hours.
So do you want to make that part of the policy? Because it's only a 1-year
I'm
thing.
not quite sure I understand what we're talking about.
So the state, what occurred was that the state made exceptions for the class of 2018.
Right.
Based upon feedback from various stakeholders.
What is your recommendation, Mr. Jolly? This is based on your recommendation.
Well, my recommendation, I think the policy, I agree the parents need to be informed of what the pathways are, but I think the policy clearly articulates what 3 pathways exist. I mean, if we come back next year and change the policy, by all means, that's an option, but
But the principal is his responsibility to get the information out to make sure that each parent know the requirement for graduation.
Along with
That
the
should be
guidance
done-
counselors.
That
Right.
should be done.
We're talking 2 different
We're
topics
talking
right
2
now.
different things.
Yeah.
We're talking
I'm
so
policy.
she wants
Here
the
I'm
new
talking-
rule,
here
the
I'm
new
talking
rules
the-
inside
the
of
new
it.
rules that were passed
Yeah, but
down
that's
from,
not gonna be implemented until 2018-19.
But we're in 18. We're about to go into 18.
Yeah.
But next year,
2018.
I know we're about
Remember, Elba?
graduation.
No, he's talking about they are being exempt this year.
So I think Member Elba's question is, we
It's
should
this.
include
Right.
we should
this
include
year's.
what's coming from the Department of Ed, is what I'm saying, as far as the 2018 requirements. What Mr. Jolly is putting down is that there are no numbers in here. These parents need to know that there are certain numbers of hours that needs to be completed. If this is going to be a policy, then this needs to be the 2017-2018 policy, and then this will be the 2018-2019
But I have a
policy.
question though. Mr. Jolly, you said you were going with option 2, and I noticed in our package, page 2 of 7 is missing. So is option 2 what we're looking at here on this document here?
Page, which one? I have page
Option 2.
If you
I'm
look it
sorry.
up if you have your iPad.
I have it here.
Those are the,
It shows in the,
those are the credit requirements. So Member Elba, your recommendations well taken. I will add this to the, I think it's good to put it in the policy.
So specifically, what are we adding?
What we will add is, for 2018, we will put the option 1 and option 2 as part of it.
So we will say option 1.
And then list options, we will put in there for 2018 only. And then we will put the 2 options that they received for 2018.
So I'd also like to run this past Neola.
Yeah.
Once we do it.
Okay.
And maybe even legal to make sure that, we agree with this since we're talking a policy.
Yes.
everybody.
I totally agree.
So we'll make the adjustments and send them to both parties by Tuesday of next week.
Mr. Jolly, I think sometimes the biggest problem is lack of communication. I think that at the beginning of the first week, especially the seniors, should know their requirement to graduate. If they need 120 hours, the parents should know that and know what they're missing. You know, don't wait till January or February to say, oh, you know what, you don't have the 120
Right.
Well,
hours.
they're required to have they have to have 3 meetings with the parents.
But even
No,
with
no,
that,
no, I agree, they need to
at
start
that
now.
first
They
meeting,
need to start
So,
now.
in
let's
his
wrap this up.
defense, if I can say, because we knew that this policy needed to be done back in May.
I
We
understand,
were told that there were gonna be some additional changes.
right.
So,
I
we
understand.
are addressing it as quickly as possible.
I know, I understand that.
I hear what you're saying, but
I'm just saying, communication has always been.
Right,
an
with the
issue
parents, you're right. I totally agree.
with the parents, and the first thing they will say, well, I didn't
You
know.
know.
And I'm saying, let's just nip this in the bud. Let's correct it at the beginning, and at the end, we don't have to worry about it.
Actually, I think the options give our seniors a great opportunity to graduate.
Right.
Provide some great pathways.
Right.
So, right, OGT is gone.
Any other questions for Superintendent Jolly on policy 5460?
So even though this is a first reading, we're saying we'd like
Some additions.
Right.
some things done, and clarification, so we'll bring it back.
Correct. Any other questions? Next on the board agenda is our strategic plan, number 6. Mr. Jolly, did you want to touch base on 6.1?
It says 6.1.
Yeah, we struck it out.
6.1 is gone.
Yeah, we
Oh, I'm
struck
sorry,
it.
6.3, I mean 2, I'm sorry.
Public
Public
participation.
participation.
Do we have any public participation cards?
No.
Next on our board agenda is unfinished business. Mr. Jolly, did you want to address 7.1 or
Yes, air conditioners.
Mr. Boyer?
Yeah, Mr. Boyer, we could take, but they're all installed at every building. I think we,
Installed in every building, we have identified a couple of classrooms in Warrensville, we're getting those and put in, the next few days or so.
What buildings were those, Mr.?
I think there's a couple rooms at the, middle school, and we identified, one of the new classrooms off the gym at, Westwood.
Okay.
They didn't get one for, I don't think they knew it was gonna be a classroom, I think it was previously a storage, like off the gym or whatever. One of the areas where we just put the carpet in.
yeah, one area was the science hallway at the middle school. No windows, so that they weren't accounted for. That was one place.
With that one, we're looking at possibly the main air conditioner there,
Right.
a central unit, heat that area as well as a couple of other areas there, and I've just got a quote today, comfort system to repair one of the compressors on that, rather than do two of them, 50-ton unit, I think a 30-ton will do. So we can repair one of the compressors with a rebuilt compressor, it'll last us several years. I think take us through, get down the road to the new building. So I think that's what I'm gonna recommend. But like I said, I just got the quote today, I wanna get another quote.
Okay.
Then also Westwood. Westwood is almost ready to go. There's still some cleaning doing. Teachers are in the building. The signs are up. We're working well with Pastor Everett to ensure that it's a partnership. So there's conversations daily. Mr. Boyer and myself, either one of us talk, discuss different items with them. But it's going good. Mr. Boyer, you want to add anything?
No, it's just, the relationship, with the church is building, it's good, collaborative, they've been very helpful, and, cooperative, so, it's been a win-win all the way along the line. I know it's a big change for them as well as for us, and we're all just working towards this what's best for the children.
I have a question, Mr. Jolly.
Mm-hmm.
So we get the text today with the billboard of Westwood. Why was there a need to put the board members' names on it? There's no address on it.
Well, in most cases, when you put up, like, start new things, you do put the board members on there. So, we just tried to do tradition what I've seen. So, and wanted to recognize the people who made it happen. So I think it was kind of recognizing the board and for their work to make this occur. So that's why the name's on it.
That's standard. When we put up our new buildings, there'll be a plaque that the names will go on. although it'll be it'll be real permanent. I wanted to add something, Mr. Freeman, if you're.
Go right ahead, Treasurer.
In regards to Westwood, we really have some strong team players and team members that are really working hard out there.
Yeah, Rob, Jonathan. They've been working real hard. But I did want to say, we put the board members' names on there because you guys allowed it to happen, and we wanted to make sure that you were recognized.
Any other questions about those two items, board members?
Well, no, I have another question for Mr. Jolly. It's unfinished business. I appreciate you sending the evaluations out. Thank you for that. But I do have a question. I'm not sure if you were aware that the athletic coordinator did an evaluation on their own sibling. I'm pretty sure that's a conflict of interest.
No, I was not aware.
Yeah. We can talk about that another time. I want to address that right now.
But you don't have to address it.
No, I understand, but I mean.
But I can still mention it.
I
Okay, I can mention this.
We're not going to talk about evaluations from.
I can mention this to Mr.
That's fine. I was not aware.
Correct.
Okay, that was in your
Face to
thing
face.
that you sent us.
That's fine.
So
Okay.
that should be.
Next board,
Be sure to take
7.3 is board self-evaluation. I think I sent you guys the 3 actual companies that I had talked to, and I would like, as a board, we need to see which company that we want to choose to do our self-board evaluation. You guys should have had a copy. If not, I can get you a copy to your, or resend the email. But it gives you a breakdown of all 3 companies, OSBA, ESC, and significance. All 3 of the companies have done a good body of work. It's up to us who we want to facilitate it for us. And part of the OD summary was actually questioning us as a board as we're doing anything for board development. So this would be part of that board development.
Who asked you that?
No, the ODE put it in their report. If you read their report about our board, it states that.
But we do board development.
No, they specifically talked about us needing to come together and work together as a board. It was one of the bullet points. It was pretty clear.
It's very
They
clear.
said basically that we can't govern ourselves.
Correct.
It's about.
But those are the 3 companies. I would like everybody, if you need more information, you reach out to them and get more information. But I would like to make a vote on the 24th as a board and see which company we can use. Next on our board agenda, new business. Part of the master plan, when Superintendent Jolly and Dr. Rock put this together with the gentleman you've seen here, that master plan did not include the old library. When the city of Warrensville Heights and Councilman Matt Howard and them, they actually transferred that building over to the district. So that's part of our building, but it's not in our master plan for our pre-K to 5. So at this time, we need to decide what we want to do with that building. It is an eyesore. It is costing us lots of money, Dr. Rock?
We have to maintain
How
the
much is it costing
utilities
us?
on it.
Yeah, what is it costing us?
How much is it costing us? And I think that for something like this, we shouldn't have to see it on an agenda. This should have been conversation long before now.
Okay, but we're discussing it now.
Dr.
Well, I do want to say why it came to conversation. The mayor asked us to ask the board to engage in conversations about it.
Yep.
To see if the city could possibly take possession of the library.
So it's the old building. Like I said, it's not part of our master plan when we go to build, so it's gonna sit there. So, I'm sorry?
My question would be, if that land is gonna become ours, and we extending, we're gonna have a building that is K through 5, it's gonna be a larger building. So more than likely, we would need that space if it just utilized for parking.
So I want to say our property line goes all the way to Northfield.
Okay.
If you look where the store is, our property line goes from where the church entrance is all the way to the stores. The store's like in a box, and that's our property. So those woods are our property.
Okay.
Also, so there's ways that we can move the school closer to Northfield. There's ways we can move it closer to Northfield.
do we wanna move it closer to Northfield, because we're talking about some very small children, and Northfield is a busy street.
So I think that's when, like, once we bring our architect on and have community meetings to decide that. But I think the mayor, in his conversations with us, wanted to entertain and talk to the board about possibly a swap of land or something for that property, for usage, city usage. So that's where we want to bring it to you, and just see, can we engage in conversations and see what the city might want to offer us for that. I do believe we can build the pre-K to 5 without that. We have a lot of land, a whole lot, even on the side of Randall, it's like an old baseball field.
Right,
All of that is our property. So we have a lot of land there to build what we need.
So,
Mhm.
excuse me, excuse me.
That's fine.
Who was asking for part of the land, or some of the land, or all of the land?
No, the mayor asked if we can, we could talk to, if I can get your permission to talk to the city about the property.
Swapping for what, for what?
We haven't gotten conversations at all. It's just a ask.
Just to see what options.
Just to see what to start the conversation
Oh, okay.
about it. No offers been made, no in detailed conversations. It's just, you know, I'm interested, the city interested, can go up to the board and see. So we'll be, if the board, with the board's blessings, we'll talk to the city and then come back to you with, if they offer something and bring it to you and see what you think.
I have another question regarding that. On the other side of it is a cemetery, and they can have eminent domain. Because the cemetery is expanding. Can you find out about that as well?
Yeah, let's find out about the city.
Usually school property is locked in
Right.
because of
School property.
it actually goes back to the Western ordinance, where everywhere you had a city or a township set up, they gave you that land, and that land was locked in for public educational purposes.
Right, so in the library was the Cleveland Public Library, and really, if you, the history of it, Warrensville City Schools built the library, and then the library leased it, and then when they built the new one, they gave it back to us.
Right.
So that's the history of built it. So we just asking for permission to have that conversation with the mayor, whatever, or with council, and whatever those discussions come to, we'll bring it back to the board with with all the answers researched, and if we move forward, we don't, the board don't like whatever the conversations are, by all means, we just want to start that conversation about that area.
Any other questions about?
So you're asking, so we need to give him an answer
Permission.
as to whether or not.
I'm fine with it.
I'm fine
It's
with
not part of our master plan, it's just gonna be sitting there.
I have no concerns with the discussion.
I don't either. I'm curious to see how it'll go.
it. Right.
So with your permission, we'll start the conversations with the city.
Thank you, Superintendent Jolly. Is there any correspondence, Treasurer Ruck?
No, sir.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Mm.
Oh,
Moving. Keep
oh,
going.
she said she didn't get it. Is there any correspondence?
No, sir.
Okay. Announcements, I would like to make a few announcements. Tomorrow, Warrensville Heights City School District will have their convocation for the 2017-18 school year here at the auditorium at 8 a.m. with all the educators and staff. On Monday, August 14th, Westwood will have a walkthrough reopening. So Westwood will be open, your old school, Mimi, on the 14th from 6 to 7. So all the people want to come and see the new Westwood, you're more than welcome to come this Monday from 6 to 7. Our first day of school for the district, first grade to 12th K, is August 16th. That's a Wednesday. So that starts from our first grade to the 12th. And then our kindergarten starts on the 21st of August. And then our pre-K starts on the 26th at John Dewey. So I just wanted to get those announcements. At this time, board, is there any other board business that we need to discuss? I will.
I'll be there.
Are you coming, Michelle? Oh. All right, at this time, I would need a, motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chair, I move that this board adjourn our work session for Thursday, August 10th, 2017.
Do I have a second?
I second.
Next board meeting is August 24th, regular meeting at 7 a.m. Thank everybody. We are adjourned.
Let me take the vote.